Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Real Estate Minute, the show that answers all your questions about buying and selling in the bustling Vancouver real estate market. I'm your host and realtor, Ryan Deluca, and today we're going to be tackling a topic that most people in condos don't think about, and that's curb appeal. Yes, curb appeal is not just for homeowners anymore. It's now important for everyone looking to buy and sell condos in the slowing Vancouver real estate market to pay attention to what the outside of their building looks like. Joining us today is a longtime friend of the Real Estate Minute, Fiona Wilson, and we're going to start off by talking a little bit about plants that you can use that are native to Vancouver and BC that work well in any garden. Fiona, thanks so much for joining us again today.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about these plants, because it's really important to note that a lot of times you'll be driving by condos and you'll just see either overgrown bushes everywhere.
Correct.
Or you're going to see just dead plants.
Yep.
And a lot of people haven't figured out how to get that garden that's easy to maintain and will look good year-round.
Correct. The biggest thing is a lot of people are attracted to color, so when they're looking for their fall garden, they look at the small plants that are bright and colorful at the front of the store. They look fabulous, you put them in your garden, a couple of weeks later they aren't looking so hot because they haven't been watered. The consistency for any garden is to get something big and shrub-like in a garden, and that'll give you a good root system that will help hold water, and that way you'll be able to go a little longer between waterings and still have your garden look good. That doesn't mean, however, you can ignore it, or some plants like a rhododendron or an azalea will get out of hand and they can become quite large.
And then there are some local plants that'll work well for those of us who maybe don't have the greenest thumbs of all. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, the couple I pulled in today, we've got coral bells in two colors down in the front here. They're a fairly low ground cover. They stay about that height, but they will spread out a little for you. Just beside it is kinnikinick, or Vancouver jade. It's a very low growing shrub. It flowers, well, light pink flowers in the spring, and then in the winter it'll come up in red and white berries and look very pretty.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then you've got an azalea in its smaller version right beside there, and this is actually a rhododendron, one of the nice big ones you see at people's houses. That's what they start like, so a lot of people don't realize when they put that in, they could end up with an 8-foot shrub in it.
Okay, and what about this one over here? This one's looking real pretty.
That one's a bit of fall color, and it's just something we bring in to kind of spruce up planters, add in on the steps, something like this. It's called a crocosmus, and they're just stunning. You put them in a backdrop with some New Zealand flax or some of the millet that I have behind me in kind of a russet color, and it just, makes the doorstep look that much nicer and more inviting.
And for those buildings who are either co-ops or don't have outside gardening companies coming in to prune the shrubs and take care of the gardens for them, what would be the easiest plants for them to put in? You're
definitely dealing in something more like the rhododendrons or the azalea, because one good pruning a year, that's about all you need. You can also go with something like a fern if you have shade. They don't like being in full sun all the time, but they're big, they're beautiful, they kind of fill a space, look all lush, and they can take a lot of being ignored.
Now, if you wanted to do something that would maybe climb up the building a little bit, are there ones that you should pay attention to that may harm the brick versus ones that will do a little bit better?
You do want to watch out for ivy. There are certain ivies, and what they do is they've got small suckers that they latch onto stucco or other, any kind of wall, even bricks, and they'll chew their way through slowly.
Okay, why don't we move on and talk a little bit about lighting and see what we can do in terms of lighting the outside of a condominium.
Sure thing.
So Fiona, one of my biggest pet peeves, and something house owners have really caught on to, but condo owners haven't quite grasped yet, is that you no longer need to have the hideous glass globe with the dead bugs sitting in the bottom hanging on the outside of your building.
The classic globe light is definitely a thing of the past. There are many options available now that are much more stylish for a house or for a condo. You can see we've got a whole wall of different variety lighting. Some of them are motion sensor, some of them are the standard plug-in, you flip with the light switch, and you can get them coordinating, so you can have a motion sensor light who matches your front door light just to make it look more uniform throughout your house.
And if you're doing something, let's say with a solar panel,
certainly,
then what would you have to do if you're sitting on a cloudy day? Do you need to tie it into your electrical system, or can it still pick up enough light to run?
What most people don't realize in BC, with our 4 months of kind of shade and rain, solar panels still pick up enough light to charge themselves for the day. As long as it's a day where you can see to walk around, your solar panel is still picking up enough energy that it'll light up at night just fine, but you can tie it in as a backup if you're concerned about it.
And for security reasons, are there some that are better than others perhaps to use for lighting?
Generally what you want to look at is a lot of people like to go with the milky glass and some glass that's kind of washed out. You're not going to get as much light, so the security won't necessarily be there if you're going for vision down like a garden path or somewhere where you need to be able to see what's going on.
So you want something that maybe has a clear light, a clear glass rather.
Clear glass, and then stick to a clear bulb. and it'll give you a little more light. Yep.
Fantastic. Now the last thing I really want to focus on today is paint, because you know, you've driven by some buildings where they got the peeling paint, they got the hideous colors.
The chipping stucco and everything else.
Exactly.
Yep.
Why don't we make our way over to the paint department and go through some of the things people can do to really spruce up the paint job.
Not a problem, let's go.
So Fiona, long ago were the days of the lime green and putrid pink exterior colors.
Bright corals and other random colors, yeah.
You'd be surprised that they're still out there.
They are, most definitely.
But paint has come a long way since then, and there's a lot of things we can do to actually update the look of a property with just a simple coat of paint. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the things you brought out here? Yeah,
what I've brought out are 2 lines of paint. They're fairly new. They're both considered the Ultra line or the Smart line, depending on which one you look at. And they're kind of the problem solvers of exterior paint. So if you've got paint that's old, paint that's chipping, needs a general refresh, sometimes people aren't sure whether the paint they have on their building is oil or latex or exactly what they're dealing with. These are your problem solvers. These are self-priming paints that go on in 1 to 2 coats depending on the color, usually 1, and they just change the entire look of a house so quickly and so smoothly, and they're so easy to use.
Now when you're voting at an AGM, an annual general meeting with the Strata Council on paint colors, that tends to be one of the biggest problems. But you guys have actually come out with something that's a little interesting here.
Yeah. This is a book from Behr, and it's got color suggestions on groupings that you can use to kind of give you a good idea of where you want to go with your colors.
So it makes it a little bit easier when you're doing trim and
makes
shutters.
It a lot easier, yeah. And when you've got something like a strata where you've got a large meeting and it's a lot of people and a lot of opinions, it can solve a lot of the problems, because if you can agree on some general colors, this will narrow it down and give you a really good starting place.
Now if you were in a co-op and let's say you didn't have a lot of money and you were going to be doing the work yourself,
certainly.
Are any of these paints easier to use? Is anything a little bit better for those problem areas versus others that people may not know about?
I would say the only concern is if you're painting any kind of rusted metal, then you need to pay a little more attention to it. But painting is really nothing people can't do themselves. I'm not trying to slam any professional painters. It's great to have them come and do everything and look after it, but it's so easy to do it yourself. It just requires the right equipment, getting a really good paintbrush, and I mean a paintbrush is the main tool, and the quality of the paintbrush you get is going to reflect in the paint job that you get, almost as much as the product that you're using. So make sure you get a good one. It's worth paying a couple extra bucks for it. It'll last longer, and the job will look better when you're done.
And what are the differences between good versus not good paintbrush? I thought they were pretty much all the same.
All the same, yeah. No, you're looking at difference in bristle. You're looking at what the bristles are made out of, and you want to make sure you get one that's labeled for any kind of paint, or if you're using an oil paint, it should be labeled specifically for an oil paint, because if you use a nylon bristled brush and an oil paint, it'll actually clump together and kind of melt the paintbrush. You're not going to be getting anywhere with that.
Okay, so people should know when they come in if they're looking to paint using a specific type of paint for the exterior.
Yep.
The equipment's as important as the paint itself.
Yeah, and most paintbrushes will come labeled with all paints or oil paints or for latex paints. It'll say right on the packaging exactly what you should be using it for.
Okay, and do they come in any other sizes other than your quarts and your...
Quarts, gallons, and then you've got the big 5-gallon pails down there. So for a quart, you're looking about doing your average door. So you're going to get about 100 square feet out of a quart. For a gallon, you're going to get about 350 to 400 square feet, and then for a 5-gallon, you're looking about 2,000 square feet.
And this really has to be the easiest way to freshen up the look of a building.
It is the most amazing change. It actually is the same rule for the inside too, but most people forget about the outside and forget how much they can change the look of their house.
Well, Fiona, I want to thank you so much for joining us again today. It's been awesome having you on the show. You've
Not
given
a problem.
us so much to think about.
Cool.
We've talked about plants, we've talked about paints, we've talked about lighting.
Yep.
Anything else you can think of? Just any final tips for our viewers?
Generally, just remember, as much as you might like bright colors and you might like doing something spectacular, if you're looking at selling a house, you want something that's going to have a universal appeal.
And the same goes for condos.
Definitely. Keep it a little milder and keep it a little calmer, and you'll get a lot more attention.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So with all the great information we've received today, here are 4 tips you need to keep in mind when it comes to sprucing up the outside of your condominium. Number 1, ensure that your building maintains proper exterior lighting. A dark building can be deemed unsafe and may make potential buyers nervous. Also make sure to keep the lighting nice and modern. It's amazing how an inexpensive change like that can alter the entire look of your condo. 2, if you live in a building which doesn't hire out a gardening company to maintain the common lawns and gardens, plant local species which by nature can survive our weather conditions and will look great year-round. Make sure you keep overgrown plants trimmed back and the lawn cut regularly. 3, keep the outside of the building painted in neutral colors that complement the environment and the neighborhood around it. Shocking colors and peeling paint can give the impression that the building is not well looked after, even if it is. Finally, most buildings will have bylaws restricting owners' choices and window coverings to maintain a uniform look from the outside. If your condo does not have such a bylaw, it may be time to raise the issue at the next AGM. Crazy patterns and drapery made of bed sheets and other materials really detract from the look and can hurt your bottom line when it comes time to sell. Thank you so much for joining us today. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to write in at nvtv@novusnow.ca. I'm your host, Ryan Deluca, and we'll see you here next time on the Real Estate Minute.